engaging the community since 1970. This is WIS Awareness.
Good morning and thank you for joining us for Awareness. I'm your host, Megan Norman. What happened behind those doors on a Monday morning in a math class at Spring Valley High School quickly became a national spectacle. It seemed stuck on repeat as we all watched a student forcefully pulled from her chair by a school resource officer and flung across the room. The student shot videos from different angles circled the globe. Shock, outrage, and then the questions. What happened before the video starts? What's the role of school resource officers? The SRO in the video, Deputy Ben Fields, was fired 2 days later. And the person responsible for that decision, having to make that decision, was Richland County Sheriff Leon Lott, who joins me this morning. Thank you very much for being with us.
Well, thank you for having me here.
What was your first reaction to the video, and when were you first notified of this incident?
I was in Chicago at a police conference and got an initial call about 3 o'clock that afternoon that something was going on, and it was not until about 5:30 on the bus back to the motel that I actually saw the video. And as I said, it made me sick to my stomach. It shocked me to see what had happened, and that it had happened by one of my guys.
Did you know at that time, when you were on the bus, when you were out of town, what your decision was going to be?
No. I knew what my emotional reaction was, but again, I can't let my emotional reactions determine what I'm going to do professionally. So we had to do an investigation. So I started making phone calls and giving directions on what I wanted to happen, and that was from internally us looking at did he violate any of our policies, but also calling the FBI to get them involved from the very beginning. I want to make sure that there was no doubts, no questions in the community that this was going to be handled the right way.
Now, when did you get back into town? The incident happened Monday.
Happened Monday. I worked trying to get a flight back, left Chicago 6 a.m. on Tuesday and arrived back in Columbia around 2 o'clock.
Okay, and then Wednesday afternoon you held a press conference saying you had fired Deputy Ben Fields. What went into that decision?
Well, our training unit and also our internal affairs had started investigating it on Monday afternoon. So they looked at our policy violations, if there was any. Our training unit looked at it and see if that was proper techniques that we had trained our deputies to do. And they wrote a report, and the report came back that that technique that he used, especially throwing across the room, was not something proper, it was not something that we trained. And I felt it was to the level that made my decision that he should be terminated from the Sheriff's Department.
And some critics have said you waited too long to make a decision. How do you respond to that?
Well, I wanted to be fair. I wanted to get all the facts. I wanted to make an informed decision, and that's what I did. It was 48 hours probably after the incident happened that my decision had already been made, and we announced it publicly. So, you know, there's going to be, if I'd have waited 2 weeks, then some people would have complained and said I did it too quick. If I'd have done it 5 seconds, some people said I did it too quick. So, I mean, it's just one of those things. I had to be comfortable with it. I'm the sheriff. People elect me to make those decisions and those hard decisions. And that's what I did, but I did it fairly. I wanted all the facts and obtained all the facts, and I made an informed decision.
Did you feel any pressure from the national attention and even some of the local critics in making your decision?
No, I didn't. I went by what was right, and I wanted to know what my internal affairs had come up with statements and interviews, and also what our training division had come up with. They're the ones responsible for training these deputies. Did he violate our policies? And I waited on their report. Did not put them on a timeline and a timetable and say you have to have it in so many. I just relied on them, and they came back, very quickly. It was pretty well cut and dry. I mean, I don't think this was something that should have taken them too long, and we shouldn't have hesitated or stalled for time. They gave their decision in writing to me, and then I made my decision and announced it to everybody.
So Internal Affairs found that now former Deputy Ben Fields violated some policy procedures. So as a result of that, have you made any changes at all with policies, or have you talked to your SROs about policy?
Well, I met with all our SROs this past Monday and talked to them about a lot of things. I wanted to answer their questions and make sure that they understood why I did what I did and the reason and the facts behind it, but also to make sure that they understand we have a job to do. This one incident is not going to destroy our SRO program. We're there for the kids, and we need to keep that initiative. We need to keep our morale up, and we need to keep doing our job. And I wanted them to understand that that's what I wanted them to do. So we've reached, I think, a level where we're back doing our job, and we should be. shouldn't have been any hesitation in an SRO to do his job.
Why did you choose to fire him versus reassigning him, for example?
Well, just the severity of the incident and how it had occurred and what he had did. And you know, his effectiveness as a Richland County deputy was pretty much dead at that point. And reassigning him I don't think was the proper thing to do. So I felt like that the proper thing to do was terminate him as a Richland County Sheriff's deputy, that he represents me. Each one of these deputies are my representative. And I felt like that was not the proper representative of me and what I expected my deputies to do.
Now, in your first press conference after getting back into town, you touched upon the role of SROs in the classroom and when one should be called. Do you think Deputy Fields should have been called in this instance?
I think we've had some blurring of lines over the years. It says in our contracts with all 3 school districts that our SROs are not to be used in disciplinary matters, that we're not a disciplinary. And I think that the comfortableness that we've developed by having such a good partnership with our SROs and our teachers and the principals, we may have blurred that line a little bit. So that's one thing that I'm talking to all 3 school superintendents to make sure that we're on the same ideas, we got it, and then they need to pass that on to the teachers and staff at the schools. I've already talked to SROs about that. We're not there as disciplinarians, and so we have to make sure, and I told them we have to tell them no sometimes, and I think that's where we've kind of got a little bit lax, is that we didn't want to tell SROs didn't want to tell teachers and principals, no, that's not our job, we're not going to do that. Now they understand that they can do that, and that's the right thing to do.
So are there certain criteria in place that you know of as to when an SRO should be called, or are you now going to continue working with the school district to make those lines more clear?
Well, we're going to work with the school district to make sure those lines are clear, and I'm going to work with the legislator too. You know, this Disturbing Schools law is one of the worst laws they've ever passed. It's too broad. It shouldn't have been passed the way it was, and that was a knee-jerk reaction to some bad things that happened in schools, and we want to make sure our schools are a safe place, but I think it just too much for people to abuse, and I think it may have been abused in the past, and we need to refocus on that law and get it back to where it needs to be.
Now, there is a forum, there have been several forums held over the last week or so about this incident, and in one of them at Brookland Baptist, there were a couple of students who spoke out about their concerns. I want to play you just a couple of sound bites.
I feel that if we have more female SROs in the schools, they can deal with the female students in a different manner and possibly, you know, digress the situation.
If I stand in her shoes, I would not have given my phone up either. About a month ago, my father passed, like to this day. Last voicemail, the pictures that I'll cherish forever from this past few years, my last text messages. They're very important to me. I look at them every day. I would not have given up my phone. I'm sure that the situation could have been handled much differently, in a better way. If I was in her shoes, this wouldn't have happened because of my race.
So the first soundbite talked about having more female SROs and the students saying, well, maybe if there was a female SRO in this particular situation, it could have been handled differently. I know you said there are 87 SROs in the county. How many are female?
I don't know, but we have a good mix of them. And I think it'd be very difficult for us to say that we've got to have a male and a female in each one of our high schools. And then again, our middle schools and elementary schools only have one SRO. Which sex do you pick if there's only one there? So I don't know if that's maybe a correct thing to look at, just to have a mixture like that. We try to do the best we can, but I want them to be looked at as an SRO. I don't want the color of their skin to be looked at or the sex to be looked at. I want them to be looked at as an SRO who's there to keep the schools safe, help the students to learn and the teachers to teach, and have a safe environment.
And I want to bring up one other critique that we've been hearing from a couple of different forums. Some people saying that there were complaints against Deputy Fields that they had heard of in the past and wondering why that hadn't been looked at. To your knowledge, were there any complaints against Deputy Fields?
And that's what kind of disturbs me, is that the community, or some people in the community are saying that, but not one of them ever picked the phone up and called the sheriff's department or the school district and made a complaint on him. It's almost the opposite. We had more good things said about him than anybody ever said anything bad. And it's almost like now there's some blood in the water, and a lot of people now are sharks feeding on it and kind of saying things maybe they don't know is true, but nobody's ever called the sheriff's department or school district and said, hey, Ben Fields is a terrible officer. He's doing terrible things out here. He's awful. We're scared of him. Nobody's ever said that.
Well, he had been at that school for seven years.
7 years.
Was also a football coach there.
Very respected as a football coach. The staff there accepted him. He was part of their staff in addition to being an SRO. So if there had been complaints like that, they never were made. You know, and again, I ask people all the time, if I can't fix problems if I don't know about it. And I didn't know about this problem, if it was a problem. There's some serious concerns that if it really was a problem, or if it was just an isolated incident that he had where he did something wrong.
Well, and then floating on social media, people are saying Officer Slam everywhere, and they're using that as a negative connotation, as anyone would just normally imagine. But you have found out what the real origin is of that nickname.
All right, he also has a couple other nicknames, Deputy Delicious, White Chocolate, and Officer Slam came from the football team lifting weights. He was their strength coach. They'd be in the weight room lifting weights, and when you lift weights, sometimes you slam them down, and that's where it came from. And it came as a positive thing. Now, how it developed with other students, you know, I can't answer that. I haven't had any of them come forward to me and say anything. I've just heard the other side on that. So maybe it started as Officer Slam as a good way, and then it kind of got changed around a little bit.
The last thing I want to ask you about is, in your last press conference, you encouraged citizens to police the police.
Right.
I want you, A, to expand on that, and B, do you think that it could sometimes get in the way of you doing your job? With social media the way it is out there, with cell phones and all of that, do you think it's making deputies and all officers more apprehensive?
No, the answer to that is you're doing the right thing, you don't have anything to worry about. And again, I can't fix a problem if I don't know about it. So I want citizens to police us if they see something. I have no problems with it being videoed. I don't have problems with a citizen calling up and say, hey, I saw this happen. Why did it happen? And explain it to them. You know, that's how we find problems, by the citizens letting us know. But when the citizens don't tell me, again, I can't fix it. When they just talk amongst themselves, that's not solving the problem. You know, they have to police us, and they do it with a video camera. We tell our officers all the time, do the right thing, you don't have anything to worry about.
And you also have the Citizens Advisory Council as well, and you'll be presenting this case to them. Do you have a time frame for when that will happen?
No, they've asked for it, and once the investigation's finished, they've got a preliminary report. They came last week to the press conference. They wanted to get up and speak also, and they have preliminary information on it. So they're pretty satisfied in their mind from what they've already seen and what they've heard from me, the facts of the case, but they'll examine later. You know, that Citizen Advisory Council has been one of the most valuable things we've got, because it does give citizens a voice. They have a strong voice in everything that we do. They look at every policy we have, every infraction that we have, every termination we have. They look at everything, and they have impact on what we do. And we've been doing this now for 16 years. It's something I thought was very important to do. Again, it gives the citizens a voice in what we do, and also gives them eyes on what we do. There's no secret from them. They see and know everything that we do.
And do they give you recommendations after they review it?
Yes, they give me a written report. We present the cases to them, we present information to them, and then we leave the room. And they discuss it, and then they come up with their decision, and they file a written report with me, and then I take it very seriously.
All right, Sheriff Lott, thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you.
As soon as the video surfaced on social media, reaction poured in from all over the world. The school district held a press conference the next day.
What we all watched on that shamefully shocking video is reprehensible, unforgivable, and inconsistent with everything that this district stands for, what we work for, and what we aspire to be.
What local leaders and experts are saying about what happened, but more importantly, what lessons have been learned and what's being done now. Welcome back to Awareness. The actions of the SRO involved in the incident at Spring Valley are only part of the story. What school policies are now under scrutiny and what changes need to be made? Joining us now, James Manning, Chairman of the Board of Trustees for Richland School District 2, also South Carolina Representative Beth Bernstein, and Voorhees College professor, Dr. Bernard Moses. Thank you all for being with us.
Thank you.
Now, Bernard, you're considered an expert, so to speak, in SROs and policies. I want to start with you. What should the role be of a school resource officer, and how has that morphed over the years?
Well, the role should be primarily a defensive mode, basically to make sure students are safe on the inside from violent crimes or state statute type crimes, as well as keeping folks from coming on campus to commit crimes. The 1994-95 Gun-Free Zone Act was that policy, that federal law that helped school districts across the country to institute that type of safety mechanism where if you found in 1,000 feet of a schoolhouse with a weapon of mass destruction, then you can be charged with felonies, obviously, but you also be mandatory jail sentencing that would come behind that. And so early on, resource officers were primarily used just for protection of our young people while they were in their learning mode in schoolhouses. Over the years, as we see over the last 20 years, to be exact, that's kind of changed. And in your earlier segment, the sheriff did say that line has been blurred. I would probably say that line has just been ran over so much that we're now in a crisis across the country because some, not all, school principals have abdicated that responsibility of being the chief disciplinarian of their schools and allow resource officers to take on some roles that they're not trained to do.
Why do you think that has happened? Do you think it's a culture of fear on behalf of the administrators and teachers in the school, or when did that change happen?
It's a number of things. It could be fear in some cases, but in most cases it's probably just stress. It's very stressful dealing with behavior day in, day out. School principals and over the years have just allowed this thing to morph into something that it should have never been in the first place. And some school districts have caught on to, we need to stop this, and have backtracked a little bit on this and started to have the principal to take more control. If a parent calls up to the school and they want to know why their child was suspended or expelled or sent home, they now can't talk to the principal, versus in some cases they would refer you to the resource officer.
Right. Now, James, with this line being so blurred, from the school board perspective, do you want to see it clarified? Do you want to see specific guidelines and criteria for when an SRO is needed?
We absolutely need to clarify. I think that's one place that we all agree in all the conversations that I've heard, is that we need to review that. And in our district, we have actually been reviewing our policies, looking at what's criminal activity versus what's discipline activity, and how do we involve resource officers. And you know, our principals, and I heard your statement about principals giving up that duty to police. And you know, for us, current policies allow the officers to be involved in a number of ways, sometimes just as an observer in the classroom while disciplinary action was occurring, in case it were to either go to another level, or in some cases our resource officers actually have better relationships with some students than any teacher or administrator has. And in some cases that relationship allows them to de-escalate the situation. But we are going to have to review how are those resource officers used, when are they called in, and quite frankly, when resource officers are called in, what's the expected outcome? Before you can use a tool in the toolbox to deal with a discipline issue or a criminal issue, I think we should all understand what are we wanting the outcomes to be, and what could they be? What's the range of things that could happen in that? And so those are discussions we're going to have.
And is that going to come after this internal investigation is complete? Or
no, we're already working to set up a meeting with Sheriff Lott so we can begin discussing that. We have this incident, but what comes out of this incident is how do we go forward? And we don't want to sit and wait before we begin the discussions on how we go forward.
And Beth, what is a way we can move forward? And before you answer that, give us your reaction to this video and this incident.
I think we all are very disturbed and bothered by the video. And the lines have become blurred about the role of the SRO officer. And a lot of it has to do, from a policy standpoint, and my role in this, how I can maybe effectuate change, is change the disturbing schools statute, because it is very vague. And as a community, if we can come together legislatively from the legislature, we try to do something, the school board is communicating, the police, the sheriff's office is working together. I think we need to come together to offer these type of solutions. It needs to be in coordination.
Is any part of that statute effective, or is it just antiquated, or how would you describe it?
The statute really criminalizes certain disciplinary problems, behaviors, and it's very vague, and that's where the problem comes in. Right. I think sometimes the teachers or the faculty might rely upon the SRO officer because they have that resource, you know, the statute allows them to come in. But I don't, I was not in the legislature when this was originally enacted, obviously in 1962, but there's been some amendments. But we really need to clarify exactly what the role of the SRO and what disturbing schools, what that misdemeanor charge actually means.
Do you think that'll be addressed next session?
I hope so. I intend to, and I'm sure a lot of Richland County members of the General Assembly would work toward that as well.
And this question is really for everyone, but the disturbing schools statute, does that get in the way of what schools are supposed to be, fostering this environment of learning and getting in the way and criminalizing behavior and taking away from really the fundamentals of education?
Well, you know, for me, it's a law that is more so used as a catch-all. And it reminds me, when I was a law enforcement officer, one of the things that officers did know on the street, if nothing else, I have this charge called disorderly conduct. Disorderly conduct reminds me of this particular state law, because if nothing less in the school, I have this disruption of a class law where I can act on. One of the things we find over the years is that there's been a trio of charges that I personally hope, beyond just changing this particular law, is that we look at this pipeline of young black and female students being pushed into the juvenile justice system through referrals from resource officers. That we look at that particular venue as well, because all this is connected. And when you see these two laws, i.e. the classroom disruption state law, then you have disorderly conduct as a state statute law. But there's another piece to this, and it's called assault on a government official. Those three particular charges you'll probably find in a lot of young people's criminal records dated back from 2000, well, I guess from 94 when the federal law was enacted, the gun-free zone law, up until this very day. You'll probably find a lot of young people with those three charges. And what we find in some states, like Alabama and Georgia, we're starting to move on getting an agreement among the law enforcement officials, the schools, everyone, and all the other stakeholders to try to come to some agreement to stop this madness of referring young people to the juvenile justice system for matters of disorderly conduct or behavioral issues like attitudes.
And Megan, I want to comment on that as well, because I think we have a fine balance here, right? So one thing is that no charges can be effected until a law enforcement officer is brought into the situation. So as a school official, I cannot charge a student with any kind of criminal activity, because that's not the role that we have as educators. We can deal with the discipline issues, and as we said earlier, when do we bring the officer in? When the officer comes in, that's when we start to get into issues of what charges come out of that, whether it be assault, whether it be disturbing schools, or whatever that charge may be. But that is a law enforcement component. So that's what the discussion that we said we need to have about when does an officer come into the mix and what is the expected outcome. But a lot of folks have gotten kind of confused on, as an educator, I can't charge a student with something that is a state law. That's an issue for the officer. As far as the school to prison pipeline and zero tolerance, we've heard a lot about that as well. And I know you didn't ask that particular question, but
it's very much related.
It is related, and Dr. Moses brought that up. And I want to be clear on where we are as a school district. We have heard that. We have heard that there is bias in policies towards certain populations, and what the outcome of that is and the long-term effect that that has on students' lives. And so we've done a few things, and I know folks are looking at it and say, well, how did y'all end up here? But we have had a discipline task force in place for over a year that has looked at our policies to determine where are we criminalizing activity that we should not? Where are we overcharging students with our own internal actions? Discipline is too big for the thing that was committed with students, and how do we do better with that? So we've looked at that. We've also created had a multicultural diversity task force to look at issues particularly around our African Americans. And we also have a large Latino population that's growing in our district and others. And how do we engage with them? We hear the national story, and do we have the issue? How big is it? How do we address it? And we hired a diversity officer, multicultural officer in our district to help us do that. So we don't want folks to think that we're all talk and that we're just looking at this. We are taking actions in order to work on the very issues that Dr. Moses addressed to ensure that we do make progress in those areas.
From a state perspective, I mean, Richland County District 2 is doing this, and we need to look in other counties and make sure we look at it as a whole from a state perspective as well.
Because moving forward, this is not just a Richland 2 issue.
That's right.
It's a state issue.
Exactly. I just like to be clear, it is not just your district.
That's right. Yeah.
This is an issue that has been going on throughout the nation. It's just happened to be that this particular situation has transpired in your district.
It did, yeah.
And so I was listening to a segment where the state superintendent of education has stated that she wanted to also to look at how SROs are trained, and then she stated this pipeline issue. So these two issues do go hand in hand, and we need to take a look at this because we have thousands of young people of all genders as well as race that has been impacted negatively by this Gun-Free Zone Act of 94-95, and how these young people have been pushed into and placed into the juvenile justice system. And many of these cases could have been mitigated inside the schools.
Now, James, you brought up the task force that are currently there. Who sits on these task force, and how often do they meet, and what's it really comprised of?
So that, and I don't have the full list in front of me, but we've had the sheriff's department, we've had Dan Johnson's office with the solicitors been involved, we've had folks that are parents, we've had educators, we've had district officials. The discipline task force had over 50 people and represented a really wide array of folks with different expertise and knowledge sets to look at that. And the Multicultural Diversity Committee, while not that large, it certainly had similar representation from the community. In addition, our superintendent has had, we have a NERMA group with our ministerial alliance so that we listen to our preachers and our ministers and other religious leaders in the community. Our superintendent also has an advisory committee. One thing that I've done, and I appreciate, I think you're going to hear from a parent, a grandmother later who had some concerns and brought together a forum, and out of that forum, one of the things that I've done is the board chairs ask our board to also create a student advisory committee to us as the board. And we want to make sure that that represents a wide array of our students. We don't want to hear just from all of our government leaders. We want to hear from students who have had disciplinary infractions, students who are career and technology, students who are all paths and walks of life, that they come to us and have a voice. And so I'm excited that that's one of the ways that we can move forward and really get deeper into the discussions that we've talked about and make forward progress.
And one thing I want to ask you specifically about SROs in the district, do you encourage the relationships and the mentoring with the students, and also relationships with the parents, so they have some inkling of what's going on at home?
Well, let's be honest, relationships are the key to success in our communities in many ways. And one of the roles of the resource officers is to build relationships, and it goes beyond just a school issue. This goes into community and how our officers viewed and the information that officers get. that sometimes students are comfortable sharing with them that lead to other safety issues outside of school, because school is just a reflection of the community that we live in. It's all, and that's why I think, Beth, you mentioned working together, and that's so important that, you know, we not take this as a finger-pointing opportunity, but we take it as the community all coming together, because we haven't even begun to talk about parents' involvement in schools, and you know, our students' responsibilities in schools, and I also want to be clear that, you know, I want to be careful that we don't vilify too much our teachers and our officers and our you know, other folks who are out there all working really hard and giving their heart every day to the students that come in every day and just have one goal in mind, and that's to receive the best education that they can get. And so I want to just kind of make that comment too, because I've had a lot of folks that have come to me, they're very upset that this picture of them as a school or us as a district or our community, that folks think that that's how we conduct business on a daily basis, and that isn't how we conduct business.
And I believe that's the case, but I also would say I'm not going to let up off the principles. I'm just not going to allow the principals to get off on this, because this has been going on for over 20 years now. And we really need to make sure that the principal is the chief disciplinarian of his or her school, not a law enforcement officer, period. And the teacher's great. You know, my daughter has graduated from Richland 1, and she had a great time when she was in high school here. She's now today, she's in law school. So something's done right here in the state.
Well, it sounds like these conversations are going to continue from a policy standpoint as well as with the district. And I know we could talk about this for hours and days, but I appreciate you taking the time to talk with us this morning. Thank you all.
Thank you, Megan.
Thank you.
And thank you all both. Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
When awareness returns, parents and civic leaders weigh in on respect, discipline, and the importance of community when it comes to raising and educating children. Welcome back to Awareness. We can look at law enforcement protocol and school policies, but before either come into play, the conversation starts at home. Joining us now, Angela Carr-Patterson, a mother and lifestyle coach, Regina Williams, a parent whose daughter recently graduated from high school, and Bishop C.L. Lorick of Rehoboth United Church of Jesus Christ, and also a parent. Thank you all for being here with us this morning.
Thank you.
Thank you.
First question, your first takeaways from that incident, and most importantly, how do we move forward? What is the first step? Bishop Lorick.
My first reaction, as I'm kind of wired, was one of caution, especially when you see something on social media in a sound or vision bite, because I know that a lot of times there's a story behind the story, and the story is not the why or whatever, but it's just a matter of being able to more or less settle and understand that there is a cause for some things, and also that there are people who are responsible for making certain decisions. But emotionally, it was shocking to see something like that happen to a student, a child versus an adult. It was very shocking.
How did you address your congregation surrounding this incident, or did you?
Again, I was cautious in saying anything very public, except for warning them that these things need some thought before we react.
Right.
It's all over the nation. Everybody's now taking hearsays and making them truths and things of that nature. But I did say to the congregation, it is a very real incident. And my challenge to my congregants always is, get to your child's school before something happens. If it's this time of year, October, and your principal or your teachers don't know you, and they've never met you, we have a serious problem on our hands.
And Angela, I know you were just sickened by the whole incident.
Yeah, I literally became physically sick, and for about 3 days, and I couldn't watch the video any longer. You know, I'm on social media because of what I do, but because I work with women and girls, and empowerment of women and girls, I just couldn't imagine what she was thinking as she was you know, flying across the room. So it literally made me sick. And so when I woke up on Thursday, I said I can no longer just sit behind a keyboard. You know, I need some answers. I want to talk to somebody. Let's talk. So I planned to have the forum. And it wasn't a district forum. It was just a mother and a grandmother. It wasn't even about my company. It was just, I wanted to bring the village together to have a conversation, a peaceful conversation, so we could hear each other. I'm concerned about the state of humanity and where we are. You know, how did we get here and how can we move from here? And the support, you know, the community came out, and I did get some answers. And I was enlightened on some information, even with the with James from the district. You know, learning some things that I didn't know. So it's good to ask questions, because the quality of your life is in proportion to the questions that you ask and you ask yourself. And so I was able to find some answers, not all answers, but I did get some things answered.
And Regina, with your daughter recently graduating from high school, you were very much active in the school system as a parent. Talk a little bit about your story, your experience with your daughter.
Okay. First, when I saw the video, I cried, because I could have put my daughter's face on that child's face. My daughter was oppositional defiant. She had diagnosed of ADHD. We were in family therapy. She did have therapies and some other things that, you know, I won't share because that's her story. But I cried because it could have been her. And I thank God that she had an SRO who understood and never treated her in that manner.
Do you think it's because there was a mutual respect there?
It is because there was a mutual respect. I learned about her rights as a student, and I learned what my rights were. So when I went to a school at one time, and the school told me that I had to give 24-hour notice before I could go into the school just to do a positive check on my child, I let the principal know that that was not true. And eventually he let me go to just watch my child through the door. But I had to establish that I was not a threat, but I was there to help the school, to help my child to become a productive citizen.
So let's talk about the role of proactive parents, because as you just said, Bishop, I mean, you need to know what's going on in the classrooms and what's going on at school. So why is it so important for you to be involved in your child's education?
It is important because, unfortunately, a lot of teachers do not know what the rights are, because in the schools they may we may as educators get one lesson in special ed or in conflict or something, but we don't get the in-depth story. My knowledge did not come from the school system that I was taught and educated in to be a teacher. My knowledge came from research, going to sessions with pro-parent, learning about rights law, learning about district policies, sitting down with the principals, with the different officials, going and being a part of the PTOs.
Right, all of those really, really important, because in this particular incident we have some people who are blaming the officer, some people who are saying the student has some accountability as well. But from a parental perspective, do you think something like this could have been avoided with more parental involvement, or do you think that's something that should happen in the future, or how do you address the parental involvement?
Not speaking specifically on this situation, because I know that there are a lot of complex backstories to this, but both my sons graduated from Spring Valley High School. Of course, one in '96, the other in '98. But all the way through school, elementary and high school, we always made it a point to know their teachers and their principals. My sons were not golden students, so to speak, as it relates to discipline. As young men, they had those little areas. But there was always the communication there when if something did happen that was a little out of order, the parents knew us enough, or the teachers knew us enough, and kind of understood the structure of our home and what we as parents would and would not tolerate, so that they could contact us. I think it's a two-way thing.
Definitely.
We can't look at each other as enemies,
Right.
but we're all on the same side, and that is to try to educate our children and to navigate them through this tough situation with as less blemishes on their records and their personalities, their emotions as possible.
Right. Angela, did you want to remark?
Yeah, I had 3 children. I had, well, actually 5 children to graduate from Richland District 2, and one of the things that I made myself available because I wanted to know the teachers, the administrator, and I believe that it's the parents, it's the teacher, and the student working hand in hand for us to be successful, and that was what I wanted to make sure that the school knew, that I'm here for my child, and to work with you. And if all 3 of us work together, we can successfully get them through this process with ease and grace. And that's what happened. My children were, and I also knew the resource officer. I made myself available, and it was difficult with 3, having to go to open house, and I birthed 3, and then I have 2 stepchildren. So to be able to know all the teachers and be able to call there, go and show yourself and make yourself available, you have to. It's just a part of parenting. But I also understand that because I knew that, and I gained that from my mother, doesn't mean that everyone knows that. And so my concern is, how do we gain access to show parents and help them to understand the benefits in this? There are some parents that are working 2 and 3 jobs, and this is not, it's not necessarily, it's not a priority, but food on the table is a priority. So we've got some complex issues and some layers here that we've got to get through.
And moving forward, not focusing on this as a Spring Valley issue or a Richland 2 issue, but as really a nationwide issue for families and communities to be concerned about. What are some actionable steps you think that we can take as a community to really push us forward?
My question to myself was, even though I don't have children in the school, I have a granddaughter and one that's going to be entering next year. What am I doing? Really self-reflect, self-evaluate. How am I contributing to the demise, or how am I contributing to the building of the community? And so I realized that I'm not doing enough. And so I've got to do more and find what I can do. And so I think we all have to challenge ourselves and find out, what is it that I can do? Right.
Did either of you want to weigh in on that?
I think we also, as a community, we need to advocate against, advocate for change of the disturbing schools and zero tolerance policies.
Absolutely.
When this first was instituted in the early 90s, I was working in the court system, and I saw what was happening, and it gave me great concern that things that really were disciplinary issues were now becoming court issues, and were leaving young people with blemishes on their records that would follow them. So, and I work with school resource officers on a weekly basis in some of the elementary schools. And I see the work that they do with groups of young elementary kids. And to take one officer and raise the issue now about the importance of SROs in our schools, I think does a disservice. I think we can't throw, as the old corn says, we can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Let's just resolve the issue, but we need to tear that law asunder and start over again.
And Regina, I'll leave you with our final comment for our panel.
I think it's important at this point, because we have the ears of the powers to be, that whether it's at the school district level or the state level, that we put people in place to help parents understand what their rights are and what their responsibilities are. I cannot condone anything that my child did, but I can redirect her. I cannot place the blame on the school, but I can hold them responsible for knowing what the rights are and knowing that they have to become accountable for their actions also, and teaching parents that you cannot go in as an adversary. You must go in and you must be proactive. Do not be reactive. Check on your child. Go in, smile.
Right. And they need to be a partner in all of this.
They need to be a partner. And that is what I want to teach parents. And I want to have teachers be more relaxed, because we as teachers are afraid that if we say the wrong thing, do the wrong thing, which may be the right thing, that our jobs are in jeopardy. So this is
complex. Yeah.
This is very complex.
Well, I'm glad we have begun this conversation. Thank you for being a part of it. I hope to continue this in the future.
Thank you. Thank you.
Stay with us. We'll be right back with a final thought. In the last 4 months, our state has experienced a multitude of emotions in varying degrees: disbelief, anger, disappointment, grief, sadness, compassion, and even joy. From Mother Emanuel to the flag, the flood, and now another polarizing debate involving law enforcement, schools, communities, and even race. No matter where you stand on Spring Valley, let's stand together. Let's stand together for respect, accountability, and community. We all have a stake in seeing our schools, all of them, and all of our communities thrive. We need to be good examples and role models for our children. Let's learn from where we've fallen and failed and push ourselves to do better together, without malice or prejudice or politics. Let our agenda be simple. Let's move forward in grace. I'd like to thank all of our guests this morning. Until next time, I'm Meaghan Norman. This is Awareness.